Okay. Real question. Has anyone ever told you, I need space, and you're just sitting there like, cool. But are we talking hours, days, or should I start a new life in another city? All right. Chapter 1. Let's jump in like we're just casually talking. So, here's something that drives people absolutely crazy. You're dealing with someone who leans avoidant. Things get intense. Emotions show up. Maybe there's conflict, maybe there's closeness, and then, boom, I need space. That's it. No timeline. No explanation. No, give me a week. No, I'll text you on Friday. Just space. Like they're applying for an emotional visa with no return date. And you're left there thinking, okay, cool. But how much space are we talking about here? A few hours? A few days? A whole Netflix subscription cycle? It's honestly one of the most confusing dynamics ever. Because space sounds reasonable, right? Healthy even. Everyone needs breathing room. Nobody wants a relationship that feels like being wrapped in cling film. But the problem isn't the space itself. It's the mystery. It's that weird black hole feeling where you have no idea what you're supposed to do next. Do you wait patiently like some emotionally evolved monk? Do you move on and pretend you're totally unbothered? Do you send a casual hey, text and risk looking like you're chasing? It's like being given instructions that say, pause your life. Duration, unknown. Super helpful. Now here's the part people don't talk about enough. Most avoidants don't say how much space they need because they genuinely don't know. Not in some manipulative mastermind way. More in a, my brain is overwhelmed and I just hit the emergency exit button way. When they say I need space, it's often less of a calculated decision and more of a reflex. Their internal system goes, too much emotion, too much pressure, too much closeness, abort mission. So instead of carefully measuring out 48 hours of solitude, they just create distance, fast. It's like their nervous system grabs the steering wheel and yells, we're leaving. Can you imagine someone calmly announcing, yes, I will now require precisely 3.5 days of emotional isolation. No, that's not how it works. For many avoidants, space is not a planned strategy. It's a coping mechanism. They're not sitting there with a calendar. They're just trying to reduce whatever feels overwhelming inside them. And the tricky part? Even they may not know when that overwhelmed feeling will settle, which is why you rarely hear, I need space until Tuesday at 4 p.m. Instead, you get vague, open-ended statements that make you question your entire existence. And if you're on the receiving end, your brain goes into chaos mode. Because uncertainty is torture. Humans can handle bad news. Humans can handle breakups. But humans absolutely hate not knowing what the hell is going on. Waiting without clarity feels like being stuck on a loading screen with terrible Wi-Fi. So naturally your mind starts spinning stories. Are they losing interest? Did I do something wrong? Should I reach out? Should I disappear? Should I become a mysterious, emotionally unavailable legend? Tell me that spiral isn't familiar. And the wild part is, your reaction makes sense. Your brain is trying to regain control in a situation where you have zero information. Meanwhile, the avoidant person may simply be trying to calm their internal noise, not realizing they've just thrown you into a psychological thriller. Communication gap level? Expert mode? Alright, let's pause here for a second. Because this is where things start getting really interesting, and also really messy. Now, we're going to talk about what space actually means for avoidance. Why it feels so dramatic, and why your instinct to either chase or disappear can backfire in hilarious and painful ways. Alright, let's keep going. So, what does space even mean in the avoidant universe? Because this word gets thrown around like confetti, but nobody stops to ask what's actually happening behind the scenes. When most people hear, I need space, they imagine something pretty logical. Oh, they just want some alone time. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, space is usually not just about physical distance or having a quiet weekend. It's psychological decompression. It's their way of calming down an internal alarm system that's screaming, this is too much. And too much doesn't always mean drama, by the way. This is where it gets really counterintuitive. Too much can be. Too much emotional intensity. Too much closeness. Too many expectations. Too many conversations about feelings. Even too much affection. Yeah, that one hurts people's brains. Because you're sitting there being sweet, caring, emotionally available, basically doing relationship things. And they're internally like, why does this feel like I'm being emotionally suffocated by a very nice person? It's not that your love is toxic. It's that their nervous system interprets deep connection as pressure. Wild, right? So when they say they need space, they're often trying to regulate themselves, not necessarily escape you specifically. But from your side, it absolutely feels personal. Of course it does. Someone pulls away right after intimacy or conflict and your brain goes, I have ruined everything, fantastic. And then comes the classic dilemma. Should you reach out or not? Now this is where people usually make things worse without realizing it. Option 1. The chase. You panic. You feel the distance. Your anxiety starts doing backflips. So you text. Then maybe text again. Then send something casual but not casual. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. Did I do something? Are we good? Before you know it, you've emotionally turned into a customer politely, asking why their package hasn't arrived. Meanwhile, the avoidant person who already felt overwhelmed now feels even more pressure. Because from their perspective, your reaching out doesn't feel like love. It feels like demand. Even if your message is gentle, even if it's completely reasonable, their brain goes, see, this is exactly why I needed space, which is incredibly frustrating because you're thinking, I'm just trying to communicate like a normal human being. Option 2, the disappearing act. Other people swing hard in the opposite direction. Oh, you need space? Cool, I'll give you space so big NASA will be impressed. No texts, no reactions. Total silence. You decide to become emotionally untouchable, which sounds powerful in theory. But here's the funny twist. Avoidants often interpret extreme silence as rejection. Yes, the irony is ridiculous. They withdraw to feel safe. But if you withdraw too hard, their brain might go, oh, so they don't care. Nice. It's like two people slowly backing away from each other thinking they're being respectful, until they're standing miles apart wondering what just happened. Human relationships are comedy sometimes. Now here's the uncomfortable truth nobody loves hearing. There is no universal perfect response. Annoying, I know. But avoidant dynamics are heavily context-based. However, there are patterns that tend to work better than others. Generally speaking, pressure makes things worse. But complete emotional coldness also makes things weird. The middle ground, which is boring but effective, is calm, low-pressure presence. Something that says, I'm not chasing you. I'm not vanishing either. I'm just, here. Think steady energy, not dramatic energy. Because when someone is in a space-taking mode, intensity of any kind can feel like noise. Even positive intensity. This is why long, emotional paragraphs during their retreat phase usually crash and burn. Your heartfelt essay about your feelings? Their brain reads it like a flashing neon sign. Too much stimulation. System overload. And this is the part that's really hard for people to accept. Avoidants usually aren't sitting there calculating how to torture you. They're trying to get back to a feeling of internal equilibrium. But since they rarely explain what's going on inside them, you're left filling in the blanks with worst-case scenarios, which then affects your behavior, which then affects their reaction, which then fuels the whole cycle. It's like two nervous systems accidentally playing ping pong with insecurity. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how space often shows up right after moments of closeness? Right after vulnerability? Right after things feel really good? That timing is not random. And this is where the psychology gets fascinating. Because in the chapter, we're going to talk about why intimacy itself can trigger distance, why it's not as contradictory as it looks, and why this push-pull dynamic makes people feel like they're losing their minds. Ready for the juicy chapter? All right, bro. Chapter 3. All right, bro. Chapter 3. Now we're getting into the really mind-bending part. Have you ever noticed this weird pattern? Things are going great. You're connecting, laughing, sharing, maybe even having one of those deep late-night conversations where you're like, wow, this feels solid. And then suddenly they go distant. Need space. Pull back. Energy shift. Emotional smoke bomb. And you're left there thinking, wait, everything was fine? What just happened? This is the part that messes with people the most. Because logically, closeness should create more closeness. But with avoidant dynamics, closeness itself can trigger the withdrawal. Yeah, the very thing you think is strengthening. The bond can activate their internal panic button. Sounds insane, but stay with me. For many avoidant-leaning people, intimacy doesn't just feel nice and warm. It also feels risky. Connection equals potential loss of independence. Attachment equals potential vulnerability. Dependence equals potential loss of control. So, even when they like you, sometimes especially when they like you, their system starts getting uneasy. It's like their brain whispers, oh, this is getting serious. This means expectations. This means emotional responsibility. This means someone could hurt me, retreat. And the wild part? This can happen without them consciously deciding anything. No villain speech. No evil plan. Just an internal discomfort they don't fully understand themselves. From your perspective, it feels like a plot twist. From their perspective, it feels like self-protection. Now imagine how confusing that combination becomes in real life. You're leaning in because things feel good. They're leaning out because things feel intense. Nobody thinks they're doing anything irrational, yet the dynamic becomes a psychological roller coaster. Classic scene. You, we're getting closer, this is great. Them, internally, we're getting closer, this is scary. Same event. Completely different experience. And this is why the space request often appears at the most confusing times. Not after fights, not after problems, but after intimacy, which makes people spiral even harder. Because your brain goes, if everything was good, why are they pulling away? And since humans hate unexplained changes, your mind tries to invent reasons. Did I say something wrong? Did they lose interest? Are they talking to someone else? Should I fix this? Meanwhile, the avoidant person may just be sitting there trying to quiet a vague sense of overwhelm. Not plotting, not scheming, just regulating. But because they rarely communicate that internal process, the other person feels rejected, which then creates anxiety, which then creates behaviors like chasing, overthinking, emotional intensity, which ironically increases the avoidant's need for space. Can you see how beautifully chaotic this becomes? It's like a dance where both people step on each other's feet and blame gravity. Now let's talk about the question everyone secretly wants answered. When someone says they need space, what are you actually supposed to do? Because just give space is useless advice. How much space? How long? Act normal? Act distant? Pretend you don't care? Meditate on a mountain? Here's the practical reality most people miss. Space works best when it doesn't feel like punishment or pursuit. If your energy becomes, fine, take your space. I'm done. That's not space. That's emotional retaliation. If your energy becomes, are you okay? Do you still like me? Hello? That's not space either. That's pressure. The healthiest position, boring but powerful, is emotional steadiness. Almost like saying, without actually saying, I respect your need to breathe. I'm not going to chase you. I'm not going to disappear in anger either. No drama, no theatrics, no sudden personality transformation. Because here's something most people underestimate. Avoidants are extremely sensitive to shifts in emotional energy, more than they let on. Big reactions, either clingy or cold, both register as instability. And instability is exactly what their system dislikes. Steady, calm behavior is weirdly reassuring, even if they never admit it. But let's be honest for a second. This is hard, because you're being asked to stay emotionally balanced while dealing with uncertainty, which is basically the final boss of human anxiety, not exactly a relaxing experience. And this leads to the deeper, more uncomfortable question. How long should you tolerate ambiguity? How long should you wait? At what point does giving space turn into putting your life on hold for someone who won't communicate clearly? That's what we're diving into next. Because this is where self-respect, boundaries, and reality checks enter the chat and things get very real. Ready for the next chapter? So let's go, bro. Chapter 4. Let's land this plane properly. Because this is where things stop being abstract psychology and start becoming real-life decisions. So you're dealing with someone who says they need space. No timeline. No clarity. Just vibes and vanishing acts. And now the real question hits. How long are you actually supposed to wait without losing your mind or your self-respect? This is the part nobody can answer for you with some magical formula. There's no universal rule like 3 days equals healthy, 7 days equals suspicious, 14 days equals send a search party. Human dynamics don't work like a food expiration label. But there is something much more reliable than guessing timelines. Patterns. Consistency tells you more than promises ever will. Anyone can say, I just need space. But what happens after they say that? Do they eventually reappear and reconnect like a normal human? Do they acknowledge the distance? Do they communicate at least a little? Or do they treat space like a soft launch breakup strategy? Because let's be brutally real for a second. Sometimes I need space genuinely means I'm overwhelmed, and sometimes it quietly means I don't want to deal with this relationship, but I also don't want to say that directly. Yeah, uncomfortable, but true. This is why blind waiting is dangerous. Not because space is bad, but because indefinite ambiguity slowly eats your sanity. You start checking your phone like it's a medical device. You overanalyze last conversations. You replay tiny details like a detective in a low-budget drama. Why did they use a period instead of an emoji? It's exhausting. Now, here's a grounded way to think about this without going full chaos mode. Instead of obsessing over how much space they need, look at how the dynamic makes you feel over time. Are you calm? Or constantly anxious and mentally preoccupied? Are you living your life? Or emotionally parked in a waiting room? Because a relationship that requires you to live in a state of permanent uncertainty is not automatically deep or special. It can just be unstable. Big difference. And this is where people often betray themselves without noticing. They become extremely understanding of the avoidance needs, while completely ignoring their own. I don't want to pressure them. I should be patient. They just need time. Okay, cool. But you also have needs. You also have limits. Your emotional stability matters too. Respecting someone's space should not require disrespecting your own mental peace. That's not maturity. That's self-abandonment wearing a halo. Now let's talk about something people rarely say out loud. Space without communication is what actually hurts, not space itself. Two very different scenarios. Scenario A, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I just need a few days to reset. I'll check in soon. Scenario B, I need space, disappears into the void. Same word, completely different emotional impact. One feels grounding. The other feels like being ghosted with extra steps. And if someone repeatedly creates confusion instead of clarity, you have to stop romanticizing that as just their attachment style. Attachment style explains behavior. It doesn't automatically excuse how that behavior affects you. Huge distinction. Now here's the power move mindset that keeps you sane. Instead of asking, how do I behave so they don't pull away? Ask, is this dynamic actually healthy for me long term? That question changes everything. Because you stop operating from fear of losing them and start operating from evaluation of reality. If every conflict, every emotional moment, every increase in closeness results in distance and silence, that's not just space, that's a recurring system. And recurring systems don't magically fix themselves through wishful thinking. They require awareness and mutual effort. Not one person endlessly adapting while the other endlessly withdraws. Now don't misunderstand this. Avoidants are not villains. They're usually reacting to their own internal discomforts and fears. But your job is not to become a full-time emotional shock absorber for someone who won't meet you halfway. That's how resentment is born. Healthy space feels like breathing room. Unhealthy space feels like instability, confusion, and walking on eggshells. Your nervous system knows the difference even if your brain keeps making excuses. And let me ask you something honestly. If someone's pattern of needing space constantly makes you anxious, insecure, and mentally drained, is that really a connection you want to build your emotional life around? Because love that feels like a permanent guessing game is not automatically profound. Sometimes it's just incompatible needs colliding. And that's not tragic. That's information. The most emotionally strong position you can take is surprisingly simple. Respect their space. But don't freeze your life. Stay warm, not chasing. Stay open, not waiting helplessly. And quietly observe the pattern. People reveal their intentions through repeated behavior, not dramatic words. If they come back with clarity and consistency, great. If they come back with the same confusion cycle, that's your answer too. No overthinking required. So yeah, bro. Space is not the real problem. Uncertainty without accountability is. And the moment you stop treating ambiguity like something you must tolerate indefinitely, you regain your power in the dynamic. What do you think? Have you seen this pattern play out before? If this video made you feel personally attacked by your own dating history, congratulations, you're among friends. Like and subscribe.